They want you to know about those drones. Plus, the president leaving no doubt on immigration, his new head of Homeland Security on America's streets, and is Trump floating a new idea for your tax bill? That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. This was not the enemy.
A pronouncement from the podium before the questions even began. Many of those Northeast drone sightings got the green light from the government. But is that the end of this story, or is the truth still out there? Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Caroline Leavitt giving that announcement during her first press briefing as the press secretary. And afterwards came the many questions, including this. Why is the White House now pausing some government funds that Congress already approved? The legal fight that's now started in a moment. But first tonight from The Hill.
Here in New York City this morning, we are getting the dirt bags off these streets.
That 3-second warning from the new head of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, on the streets of New York City before sunrise this morning, as immigration and customs enforcement agents took to America's largest city arresting illegal immigrants. Hours later, at her first press briefing, the press secretary said that is a campaign promise fulfilled.
He is focused on launching the largest mass deportation operation in American history of illegal criminals. And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal. And so, therefore, you are subject to deportation.
Action in New York follows in Chicago, where the mayor there today was asked by NewsNation for his thoughts of the first week of the Trump administration. Brandon Johnson then lobbing this criticism.
What's clear from this administration is that they do not have the full pulse or the breadth of what people in America are calling for.
Our Alex Capriello was the one who asked that question, joins us live tonight with the arrests in America's biggest cities, along with the response there from the mayor today. Alex.
Hey there, Blake. It's clear that Mayor Brandon Johnson here in Chicago is standing behind his sanctuary city local ordinances that are in place, despite it putting a target on the back of his city. In essence, take a look at some of the video from all across the country. In Chicago, we know that Border Czar Tom Homan was here, same with acting Deputy Attorney General over the weekend, looking at ICE enforcement. You mentioned Kristi Noem in New York City, also Denver under a spotlight, particularly because of that high presence of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. DEA agents saying that they confiscated about 130,000 fentanyl pills, along with methamphetamine, cocaine, and the like. But right here back to Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson really trying to defend the policies that he's put in place and pushing against President Donald Trump in the White House. Here's more of what Mayor Brandon Johnson had to say earlier today at his City Hall press conference.
The fact that everything that we won and fought for during Reconstruction, he is trying to roll back the hands of time. And as I've said, that there's a clear disdain for the fact that the Civil War went in a direction that clearly there are people in this country have not accepted.
And Mayor Brandon Johnson just last night received a letter from Washington, D.C. asking him to come and testify before a House Oversight Committee in February. He's not the only one that received a similar letter. All sanctuary cities, including Denver, Boston, and New York City in specific, those are the ones that received that letter, have been asked to testify. At this point, it's very clear that the mayor is going to continue fighting back against that. He says his own legal counsel is looking to see whether or not that's a mandate for him to appear or just an invitation. Blake?
All right, our Alex Capriello asking the questions and live tonight for us in the Windy City. Alex, thank you. Joining me now is the Democratic congressman from Illinois. Congressman Mike Quigley represents parts of Chicago and the surrounding areas. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So you just heard the mayor from Chicago there. He says the Trump administration doesn't have the pulse. I just witnessed the president for the first time a Republican in 20 years win the popular vote. New York Times poll, question. Do illegals who have arrived in the last 4 years, should they be deported? 63% of Americans say yes. What about if they have criminal records? 87% of the country says yes. Who has the pulse, Brandon Johnson or the Trump administration?
Yeah, when the Trump administration says that they're all criminals, I think it has a way of influencing the public. Let's look at the analysis on it just this weekend. ICE targeted about 260 individuals in Chicago. Only 7 of them had arrest warrants for them. The Biden administration, the Obama administration, all went out to go after and use ICE and people to gather folks who have committed crimes. They should be held accountable. Let's remember, we have 11 million undocumented people living in this country. I'm not sure when this became so partisan, but Ronald Reagan signed 2 amnesties for them to be having a path to citizenship. This is a country of immigrants. A path to citizenship makes sense for who we are as a country, unless we want to change the inscription on the Statue of Liberty for our economy.
63% of the country, though, says do exactly what we just witnessed in Chicago.
Right. And what I'm saying is this is because it's on the heels of the presidential candidate and the president telling them that they're all criminals, obviously influencing this. The fact of the matter is they're not. They're the strength of this country. And the right thing to do is usually the moral thing to do. So you're not going to deport 11 million people. In the 4 years of the first Trump administration, they deported 1.5 million people. We need to secure our border. We need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. This is the strength of our country, not a weakness.
You talk about passing comprehensive immigration reform. The Laken-Riley Act, you voted against it, Congressman.
Yes.
How can you sit there and tell the American people we want to pass comprehensive immigration reform? We want to potentially even maybe work with Republicans. And when at the same time, when you cast a vote, it's against the Laken-Riley Act.
Yeah, and I appreciate the snarky way you asked that.
It's not a snarky way.
The Laken-Riley Act said if you're accused of even a petty offense, you're to be in jail. So there's some due process afforded everybody who lives in this country. So if you were going to pass a bill and try to get bipartisan support for people who care about this, and we appreciate that someone who commits a serious crime needs to be held accountable, but it just went to the extreme. A petty offense, accused, you're going to be put in jail. It's just...
It does mention burglary and larceny.
Because we do need to secure the border. We do need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. This country, I have been to innumerable press conferences where the Chamber of Commerce, the agricultural sector of our economy, the manufacturing sector, hospitality, all say the same thing. We desperately need these workers.
Let me leave.
Economy, they grow, they pay taxes. They are a strength of our country. So if the President of the United States wants to set the mindset of a country in one way, it is still the moral, it is still the right thing to do. Remember, so many of these millions are kids. They have no other country.
Let me ask you about...
Let me their whole life here. Do you think they should be deported?
Let me ask you about what President Obama...
If you're so concerned about this,
you're the member of...
The kids who have known no other country should be deported back to some country they've never known.
Congressman, respectfully...
about who we are as a country.
Respectfully, you have the vote and I do not, which is why I ask the questions and I let you respond to our viewers here on NewsNation and to those listening to us on Sirius XM. Let me just ask you this. Let me leave you with this, Congressman.
Your assumptions may be wrong.
Congressman, let me leave you with this. Do you believe the streets of Chicago are safer tonight? Yes or no?
I believe that the Biden administration was arresting 300 people a day on criminal warrants. I don't think there's any change there. The fact is,
623 is the average, so there is a little change.
Who are not committing crimes. People who are here on undocumented are 40% they are 40% less likely to commit crimes than the average citizen. So tell me where we're safer and where we're stronger as a country and where our moral fiber is. But please do your homework first before you call again.
Thanks for, listen, Congressman, we respect the point of view. That's why we asked you to come on. You see the news happening in your hometown. You hear the mayor of your hometown speaking. We saw what happened on the streets of New York today. NewsNation was there asking questions, and we thank you for your time. Congressman Quigley, who represents the Chicago area, live tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Live look right now at the White House, where in just the past hour, a judge temporarily blocked a funding pause that was set to go into effect at 5 o'clock. The Office of Management and Budget had ordered agencies to pause grants, loans, and assistance to programs involved with the executive orders that President Trump signed in his first week in office. The White House said it was a responsible measure.
This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration. Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause.
However, questions immediately arose involving Medicaid payments as the state's online portals went down. For example, the Democratic Senator Ron Wyden called this a, quote, blatant attempt, end quote, to rip away health insurance from millions of Americans. The press secretary then took to social media and said, quote, we have confirmed no payments have been affected. They are still being processed. We expect the portal will be back online shortly. Joining me now is Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, also at one point, among his many titles, ran the aforementioned Office of Management and Budget.
Hello, Berman.
Hello. So help me out here. Congress has the power of the purse.
Yes.
And the president makes this decision. How?
Yeah.
How does that work?
This is the big fight. This is what the story everybody's missing. We've talked about the word impoundment over the course of the last 6 months. Russ Vought, the nominee for OMB, has written a couple articles about it. Look, here's the big fight in Washington, D.C. When Congress spends $100, does that mean a president has to spend $100? Or can only spend up to $100. Could spend $92 if he wants to. That's what this battle is about. It goes back to 1974 for reasons nobody cares about. But that's what you're seeing play out.
Is this what Elon Musk is referencing when he talks about suing involving Doge?
It could be. With Elon, you never can really tell, right? But look, there's a big part of the conservative movement here in Washington, D.C. that believes the Impoundment Act of 1974 is unconstitutional. It ties a president's hands illegally. And the president, if they come in and say, look, my policy is that I don't want to spend money on DEI. I don't care if Congress says I have to spend $100. I'm not doing it.
How does this end? This is already in the courts. You know OMB better than anyone. How does this end?
In this building across the street. Not the one with the dome, but the one with the fancy columns in front. This goes to the Supreme Court. This is going to be a big deal. Absolutely. This is a big deal. The Supreme Court has never dealt with this part of the Impoundment Act of 1974, and they are going to get a chance.
I'm digging into my computer because of news. The president offers all federal workers a buyout with 7 months' pay in effort to shrink the size of government, the Associated Press reporting tonight.
I love it.
Why?
Well, because I tried to get President Trump to dig into civil service reform during the first term. And look, face it, it's just not very sexy. We didn't have the cool name Doge at the time. We just had this. But what he's trying to do is essentially do what you do in the private sector, buy people out of their jobs.
Okay.
Look, Berman, we're shrinking NewsNation. Take a 3 times your pay to go away now.
We're actually growing and doing just fine
I know.
over here.
Okay, fine. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Anyway,
right.
But here's my question back to the administration. If I'm a federal worker, it's almost impossible to fire me. When we caught somebody stealing at CFPB, and the lawyers told me it would take 18 months to fire that person. If it takes you 18 months to fire somebody, why would somebody take a buyout for 10 months?
So is this an admission, in a way, that it's going to be a lot harder for Doge to get rid of or to lower the head count of federal workers? Because I could look back at this and say, wait a minute, if you want to lower the head count, just fire them. Don't give them 7-month buyouts.
Can't fire.
I'm sure there's folks making that argument.
Can't fire a federal worker. It's almost impossible to fire a federal worker. They have protection within law, and then many of them have separate union agreements that make it even more difficult to fire them. When I wanted to fire somebody at CFPB, they had to go to a jury of their peers first, a committee of their peers, people they actually worked with, who'd have to make a recommendation to fire that person, which, of course, is never going to happen. Look, I applaud it. I love it. But I think you're absolutely right. They're starting to figure out that fixing the federal government is harder than going to Mars.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, thank you, sir. See you back here later in the show. Still to come here on The Hill, the House Speaker and The Hill. What Mike Johnson is telling our Emily Brooks as Republicans put their game plan together. The exclusive interview coming up. Plus, is the president floating a new idea involving how much you should pay Uncle Sam? And why is he now citing the 1800s? Plus the message from the president, what the press secretary said that he wants you to know about those drone sightings. But did we really get the full story today? I'm Blake Berman. Welcome to Washington. This is the center of politics. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation, and we're back in 4 minutes.
The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. This was not the enemy.
That, of course, the new White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, making her debut today in the briefing room with an update on those mysterious drone sightings. The drones took the country by storm almost 3 months ago. Witnesses across the East Coast describing the objects, in some cases, to be roughly the size of vehicles. The FAA enforced no-fly zones at one point. State and local officials raised national security concerns over the drones because they were even seen flying over military bases, one of President Trump's golf courses as well. Those folks expressed their frustrations right here on the Hill.
We ought to be able to trace them. And, our FBI and all the others are just with their head in the sand.
All they did was tell us they don't know anything that's going on. They're not sure what's going on.
This needs engagement from the federal level. And I think that President Biden and the Biden administration are overdue to show leadership here.
Joining me now, you just saw right there, the New Jersey Assemblyman Michael Ganamort, outspoken at the time on the drone sightings, once again with us live here on the Hill. Thanks for being back with us. Nice to see you again. Were you satisfied with the answer today?
That's a great question, Blake. I'm getting to satisfied. I would say for now, I am grateful and relieved. I'm grateful that this new administration is engaging on the issue, giving us certainly more specificity than we got from the prior administration, and relieved that the last sentence out of the new press secretary was that these are not the enemy. That's the part I'm relieved about. And that was at the core of what we were asking of the prior administration last year.
Quote, and various other reasons. Mike, that's a pretty big hole there. That's a pretty big gap, what these various other reasons would be, along with, the FAA greenlighting this. You think those various other reasons is the military?
I'd love to know. You're asking a fair question, but as I said, this is a heck of an improvement over what we were hearing in December and even the beginning part of January.
No, I hear you there, but I also see the R next to your name, Mike. So I know you support the current administration. I also know you want the answers, but that is a pretty big hole there, is it not?
It is. That's why I didn't say I was satisfied, but I'm relieved and grateful that we're getting there. I think that this statement today was a good first step. We want more than what we got today, but what we got today was more than what we got prior. So no, I'm not looking to pit administration against administration, but I appreciate hearing that this was specifically authorized by the FAA. We did not know that up until today. I call that progress. I call that a good first step, but you're absolutely right, Blake. We want more.
What do you think you need to still learn, and have you or any of your colleagues there in New Jersey been in touch with the Trump administration or plan to be in touch with the Trump administration on this?
Well, I know to the governor's credit, he has. And to your earlier question, I mean, there's an example of a gentleman with a D next to his name working with a president with an R next to his name. Right. And I give them both credit for opening up the lines of communication on this. As I said, we do want more information. We're not asking for anything classified, and we weren't last year. What I said last year was if this is a military exercise or an FAA exercise with a national security imperative, I think most of my constituents, myself included, would have been happy to hear that at the time. We could have avoided a lot of the fear and anxiety that ensued. And that is, as I said, the first step of what we got today.
Mike Ganamort, I got a feeling this is not the end of this story. He is an assemblyman there in the state of New Jersey. With us once again. Nice to see you as always. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks so much, Blake.
You got it. All right. Still much more ahead here on The Hill. The Hill's exclusive interview with the House Speaker Mike Johnson. What he is saying about the president's cabinet nominees and whether or not they will make it through the Senate. Some big ones coming up starting tomorrow when The Hill returns. All right, welcome back. Almost 6:30 here on the East Coast and in Washington. A live look right now at Capitol Hill, where the Senate will resume confirmation hearings for President Trump's cabinet nominees this week. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will testify tomorrow to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. And on Thursday, the former Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard advised to become the Director of National Intelligence, while Kash Patel will make his case to head up the FBI. So far, President Trump has 5 of his cabinet nominees confirmed. Plus, a live look right now over at the White House, where Google is following President Trump's executive orders. Google Maps will use the new names designated by the president. Now, users will soon see the Gulf of America instead of the Gulf of Mexico, and Mount McKinley instead of Denali on Google Maps. And more than 1,000 miles away from the White House, day 2 of the House Republican retreat. They are huddling in Miami, game planning about how to go about carrying out the president's agenda and seeing who has issues with what items. The president is focused on the border and taxes, but there are questions about if those massive lifts will be lumped together all in one big package or done separately at varying points in his first year in office. Now, that is just some of what the House Speaker Mike Johnson will have to navigate, as House Republicans only have a 3-seat majority. Live from Miami, we are with NewsNation Politics, powered by The Hill. Just a short time ago, The Hill's congressional reporter Emily Brooks sat down with the House Speaker Mike Johnson for an interview about the work ahead for the House. Now, in their conversation, he called the national debt the number one issue facing our country.
The number one threat to our nation right now is our debt. It's not China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea. It's the debt. And we take that very seriously. Congress has kicked the can down the road for decades, and we're out of road. And so we understand that it's our responsibility to fix this, to change the trajectory that we're on, and that will be the greatest lasting contribution that we can make for our children and grandchildren and for everyone.
Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff in the first Trump administration, NewsNation contributor. Hannah Brandt, political correspondent for our Nexstar Washington, D.C. bureau. Michael Schnell is the congressional reporter for TheHill.com. And Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. Nice to have you in. Some pretty good stuff there from our colleague, Emily Brooks. Before we dive into that one soundbite there, what was your takeaway overall listening to this conversation with Emily and the House Speaker?
There was one significant policy statement that Johnson made. He opened the door to increasing the debt limit with help from Democrats. Now, Johnson's initial plan was to put this in that big, beautiful reconciliation bill, that GOP-only bill. It makes things easier. But the debt limit is becoming one of the more thornier parts of that package. Hardliners are demanding deep spending cuts. Moderates aren't going to be on board with that. You mentioned the slim majority. It's basically a zero-win opportunity. Johnson seems to be coming to that realization and saying it's likely going to be stripped out of reconciliation, potentially to be done with Democrats. The problem with that is President Trump on a number of occasions has said that he doesn't want to give Democrats a point of leverage.
He doesn't want that.
He has on a number of occasions also criticized the deal Kevin McCarthy cut with former President Biden to raise the debt limit. So this isn't a Johnson versus Trump issue per se. It's Johnson recognizing that legislating in his conference is going to be very difficult.
Not going to be easy. Your big takeaway?
I think just how in lockstep Speaker Johnson seems to be with the Trump administration. We really haven't heard him dissent from them at all. And yes, it's early on, right? We're in week 2 now, is it? Right. But so far, we haven't seen a lot of disagreements between him and the administration.
What about what he just said there? The number one threat to our nation is our debt. It's not China, Russia, or North Korea.
Well, that's not the argument that Republicans made when they ran for re-election and the president ran for president all of last year. So that's news to me. I thought immigration was the greatest threat confronting our country. I thought the Biden administration's mishandling of the Middle East was the greatest threat in our country. I mean, they keep moving the ball here, and ultimately there is a big divergence here in if you're going to address the national debt and get a rein on spending and have a balanced budget. You can't do that and then do all the things in this big, giant reconciliation bill that they're talking about. Those are incongruent.
So it occurs to me that there's always different audiences, Mick. And when Mike Johnson says that there in Doral, sitting next to congressional Republicans, who's he talking to?
I have no idea. I've sat.
So then, what do you make of what he said there?
I've sat in that room. Okay? I've been to 6 of those meetings, right? And as a member, I'm sitting there the whole time thinking, why am I here? I've heard these same speeches again and again. If I had $1 for every time I had a Republican leader say we've kicked the can down the road for too long, I could pay off the debt. Okay, the rubber's going to meet the road on the spending bills that they pass, and I just want to know how they're going to pass a spending bill that spends less money. I don't see it. So, yeah, if I'm a fiscal conservative, I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus, I'm down there. Look, I like the fact that Mike Johnson is going to say this. I don't expect the world to change.
All right. One of the other big stories in Washington today, the pause that the Trump administration wants to go forward with. It's been put on hold. It's a temporary pause on federal loans and grants, and a judge has put that on hold. Here's what the House Speaker had to say.
It is a temporary pause. For some programs, it could be an hours-long pause. It is not a big thing. Some of the programs have already been approved. But this is I believe, an application of common sense. We want to make sure that the executive orders of the new president are being fully complied with regard to these programs. So I think these will be quick reviews. I don't think this is a major interruption of programming or anything, and it specifies in the OMB guidance that any direct aid to individuals is not included in this.
Any issue with what the Trump White House did today?
No.
Why not? You're a Democrat saying that.
Yeah, because this is what they said they were going to do. They are literally delivering on the things they promised. Nobody should be surprised. No one should be upset. They said we're going to rein in government spending. We're going to rein in the federal workforce. We're going to stop government spending money that the American people don't want to do. This is what this looks like. Whether it works or not, we'll find out. Whether they're able to do it competently and execute in a way that the American people like how it goes out, we'll find out. But this is what they said they were going to do, and they're doing it.
I will say some Democrats I spoke with today were shocked about just how far this went. And they said the reason why they were shocked is because they didn't expect this sort of across-the-board pause on federal spending. They expected more targeted cuts.
Well, it does relate to the president's executive orders, though.
Right. It does. But they said one of the big things about this is there's so much uncertainty. There don't seem to be a lot of details that were rolled out with the plan, and we're getting them kind of rolled out hour by hour. Oh, this is exempt, this is exempt. But that uncertainty can do harm, is what the Democrats I spoke
to Hannah's point, the White House sort of had to take this hour by hour today.
Right. And I mean, the Democrats on Capitol Hill, I can tell you, are sounding the alarm. The House isn't even in session this week, but House Democrats are having a virtual caucus meeting tomorrow over the phone to discuss this decision by the Trump administration and presumably to figure out what their response is. Hakeem Jeffries is calling this an illegal move by the Trump administration. So we've seen the White House they had to defend it a number of times at the first briefing. They've had to say Medicaid is not involved in this. They've had to clarify what's going on here because of this confusion that was going on across the country. House Democrats are trying to seize on that, and they are really sounding the alarm.
You're the former budget director. If Hakeem Jeffries calls this an illegal move, what would you say?
We'll find out. Look, there's always going to be uncertainty in Washington, D.C. when anybody suggests spending less because we never do it, okay? And anybody who suggests we spend less is going to get somebody upset because they love spending money, and that's both parties. As to the legality of it, you and I talked about this in a previous segment. There's going to be a battle at some point over the impoundment authority. When a Congress appropriates $100, does that mean a president must spend $100 or can't spend more than $100? This is a battle that goes back to 1974 when the law came in to sort of tie Richard Nixon's hands because he was threatening not to spend a bunch of money. That's what we're going to find out. So when you ask me when we're going to find out, at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you think this is headed to the top court?
It's done on purpose. In fact, I think if you go through, if we had time to sort of break it down, where they are spending, where they're making the cuts, it's in a bunch of different circuits. There'll be a lot of different lawsuits. You get different decisions at the Court of Appeals, and that's what gets you into the Supreme Court.
Democrats are having a virtual conference call to figure out what to say about this. I'm sure that sent shivers up and down Pennsylvania Avenue. Oh, my.
By the way, Elon Musk is coming to the rescue. The SpaceX founder sharing his conversation with the president just a little while ago about the 2 NASA astronauts. Remember them? We haven't forgot about them. They're stuck in space. Musk saying, quote, the president has asked SpaceX to bring home the 2 astronauts stranded on the space station as soon as possible. We will do so. Terrible, Elon says, that the Biden administration left them there for so long. Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore have been stranded in space for around 8 months now. Their mission was originally supposed to last 8 to 10 days.
We've been asking that question on the show since these people got stuck, which is why not just have SpaceX do it? Listen, even if you're a Democrat, you have to love something about the Trump administration, which is They're actually doing something. They didn't win an election and sort of say, well, we'll get to it in the next 18 months. Here's the first week, and they're dealing with so many different things, including something we
Biden got those hostages home. Just saying.
Do what?
Biden got those hostages home. I mean, he's getting people home.
There you go. That's fair. I think you can say both folks can take credit for that as well. But he could have got these astronauts home by calling Elon Musk 6 months ago and didn't want to do it because Elon was supporting Trump.
I think there's a bigger conversation here about NASA and the future of space and their budget. And will they touch the NASA budget? Ask the Republicans in Florida if they want to do it. They will say nope, but they're happy to send Elon up, just part of the conversation and the dynamic. Still to come here on The Hill, the DeepSeek dilemma, how the comedian Jon Stewart reacted to the market meltdown, and President Trump talking about the 1800s. Is he laying the groundwork for major changes to your upcoming tax bill? What you have to pay Uncle Sam and why he's talking about the 19th century. On the other side of the break.
NewsNation tonight. Laura Trump joins Chris live with an inside look at President Trump's first full week in office. Then tomorrow, the one and only Bill O'Reilly and Stephen A. Smith are live in a special 2-hour edition of Cuomo, only on NewsNation.
It's time for the United States to return to the system that made us richer and more powerful than ever before. We should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens.
All right, so what did we hear just there? It is now the second time in a week that President Trump has referenced the pre-income tax days in this country, while also touting tariffs. Now, we know the president and Republicans want to extend the Trump tax cuts that expire this year and add on to them as well. But why does he keep talking about the days when Americans didn't have to pay taxes on their paychecks? Full panel back with me now. Mick, former budget director, you ran the numbers today on this. Because I sent this to you, and I'm listening to what's going on, and I'm just wondering to myself, is he setting up the argument for really lowering tax rates and saying, you know what, we're going to pay for it with tariffs? You looked at the numbers.
Yeah, and it doesn't work.
How so?
I skip through all the big numbers. Take the amount that we import every single year, the amount we spend every single year, the amount we raise from the income tax. Essentially, if you want to fund the government through tariffs, the tariff rate has to be slightly over 100%. So it has to double the cost of everything that we import. Plus, you have to make the assumption that we don't switch any imports to domestic production, which of course is the purpose of a tariff in the first place. If you don't import anything, which is what some people would say is a perfect world for tariffs, and you're relying entirely on tariffs, your revenue is zero. So it doesn't work. I think it's a marketing tool. I like it. It's raising the discussion about the importance of tariffs, but there's no way we're ever going to run the government off tariffs.
So to the numbers, all government spending $6.16 trillion. Individual income taxes collected about $2.2 trillion. All taxes collected $4.47 trillion. The total imports, as Mick points out, $3.8 trillion. So if you were to put, let's just say, a 25% tariff, that gets you in the neighborhood of about $900 billion or so.
Yeah, out of
you would need tariffs at
50. You got to spend.
Right. You would need tariffs at 57% to replace individual taxes and 116% at all taxes. Is this the start, though, of a negotiation? Because there's going to be some questions here about if Democrats will be able to support some of what Trump wants to do, especially in some of these blue states.
This sounds like the I'm going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it math, which last time I checked, Mexico never sent us a check for that wall, so I don't know what anyone's talking about there. Donald Trump's not a big details guy. Yeah, if you haven't noticed, he likes to make bombastic statements, make huge pronouncements, and when it comes to the actual detail of it, he has no clue.
He did get the last tax law passed.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big one, pretty big detail.
I don't know how we're going to do that and lower the national debt, which is our number one priority and the biggest concern we have confronting our country right now.
Mike Johnson. So where are we on this?
I mean, I think also an interesting thing that should be included is that there are millions, tens of millions of Americans who don't pay income taxes every year because of where their tax bracket is. So increasing tariffs would mean the price of goods would go up, which means that Americans would be paying more, including those Americans who don't pay an income tax. Right. So I think that's something that's probably going to be included in the conversation here. I suspect Democrats may raise that point. But this is just more, as Mick noted, more of the latest of Trump using tariffs to his advantage. We saw it with the Colombian president. He threatened the tariffs. The Colombian president accepted the migrants. It seems to be going to be a core part of his administration. We're going to be hearing a lot more about tariffs.
This is going to be one of the biggest stories coming up here, I think, in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also point out when we talk about taxes, one of the things we could see Republicans do is claw back money from the IRS. We've already seen them do it. Remember, the Inflation Reduction Act gave the IRS an $80 billion cash infusion.
Mick is itching to jump in, but finish it.
No, Hannah's been some. No, you said something.
That happen again.
Absolutely. No. The first place my head went to is not the personal income tax. You said something really important. You could replace the corporate tax with just tariffs. The corporate tax only raises a couple $100 billion a year, and you could replace that. You could take your corporate tax to zero and replace that just with the tariff. So that, I wonder if that's where he's going.
He'd get fought tooth and nail on that, though, would he not?
He's going to get fought tooth and nail on everything. What are you talking about? I mean,
well, and this
Michael's
isn't
right.
just a President Trump thing, right? We've heard in Congress lawmakers bring up this bill to abolish income tax, Congress after Congress, and I would point out it never gets enough support to happen. So.
But Michael's point is a really good one, is that half the people in this country don't pay the income tax, right? They pay payroll taxes. Right. And that's important, but that only goes to fund Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, right? They don't pay income tax, which funds everything else that comes out of that building. And if you switch to a tariff and off the income tax, everybody's going to pay in, which means it's an infinite percentage increase in what you pay to the government.
All right. Meantime, The Daily Show's Jon Stewart weighing in on the new Chinese artificial intelligence company, DeepSeek.
DeepSeek? DeepSeek? We're getting our kicked by DeepSeek? Who names an AI company after the thing it actually does? Where are your random letters? Where's your GPT? Your Grok? DeepSeek sounds like what you might use it for. China's even beating us at naming
DeepSeek. Now the talk of Wall Street, Silicon Valley, even President Trump. DeepSeek is the AI assistant that's comparable to OpenAI, which is the top performer in the U.S., which has about 2,000 employees, has raised billions of dollars. DeepSeek claims they were able to basically build, they claim, a product that does the exact same thing, that is just as proficient, maybe just as good, for $6 million with just a couple hundred employees, Kurt.
Yep, that seems to be the trend. We come up with something, they do it better, cheaper, and then we end up buying it for them for some reason, and there you go.
You think that's where this is headed?
And listen, the economy never lies. If it's cheaper and performs just as well, that is where everything will end up going.
The economy never lies, but the Chinese always do. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much credibility I put in this. Clearly, the markets did.
There's a lot of they claim here.
Yeah, clearly the markets did, and that's real. I mean, they lost. I think Nvidia lost what, $900 billion.
$600 billion yesterday alone, give or take.
Clearly, the market believes it, but it's sort of like looking at Chinese GDP numbers. I'll believe it when I see it.
So is it part of the conversation here is going to be about export controls with NVIDIA and its chips and how DeepSeek potentially got around that? Did they get around it? I don't know.
Yeah, this is, I think, definitely going to be a conversation, particularly up on Capitol Hill when you talk about AI in general. Lawmakers have sort of inched closer to having this conversation about artificial intelligence on Capitol Hill. There's been, for sure, a group in the Senate that's been very gung-ho on this. But this is going to become more of a largely talked about thing in the Capitol, which will be interesting because, as we know, Congress tends to trend older in age.
I was going to say, so, with the internet, with social media.
There's going to be maybe a learning curve, but
I
think
that right here. Come on. Wow.
And not in Capitol, but the White House, too. I mean, you may have missed it when Trump signed 100 executive orders. One of them, though, had to do with AI. And I think the exact wording was something about enhancing America's AI dominance. And basically what he did is directed federal agencies to come back to him with ideas on how to make America more AI-friendly.
I saw a Sam Altman, who's the head of OpenAI, interview, it was a deal book a few weeks ago. And basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, suggested that world governments are going to have to come together over time. And I'm like, when does that ever happen? And that's going to be part of the conversation going forward. My gosh, the new frontier, it is here. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us tonight. Still to come on the other side of the break. He is one of the most influential podcasters out there. Have you heard what Joe Rogan is saying about his personal politics, especially after what he saw at the inauguration? Leland Vittert joins me on the other side.
I consider myself a Republican. I don't consider myself a Democrat either. I consider myself an American. Mm-hmm. I'm a human being. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that the Democrats believe that I believe too. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that they say that I say that makes a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that the Republicans say that makes a lot of sense to me too. And the idea that I have to ignore things that make sense to me because it's coming from the wrong team is just stupid.
That is Joe Rogan on his top-ranked podcast just days after he attended the presidential inauguration. He slams tribalism in politics, being on one team in particular. And that argument seems to be resonating. Consider this. According to a Gallup poll last summer, 43% of Americans thought of themselves politically as independent. In 2004, 20 years prior, that was only 31%. Joining me now, Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. I found what Rogan said there to be fascinating, and I think it's resonating. Folks know where they can go to listen to or to hear from or to root for one team, or on the other side to listen to hear from and root for that team. And then there's this big part of the country in the middle that is only growing, Leland, and saying enough of that.
Well, Joe Rogan should thank Chris Cuomo, because Chris Cuomo has been saying that for 3 years, or at least provide a little bit of credit there. There is no question that there are people who are saying, I've had enough, and that is because the parties themselves have become so much more polarized, right? And I think it was Elon Musk who tweeted that meme, right, about, I've stayed here, but the party has gone just farther away. I've stayed in the center. And there's a reason for that because of gerrymandering and a whole lot of other things that we can go on and on about. But Donald Trump, and to a certain extent, other politicians who've transcended party, think John Fetterman, has also figured out how to bridge that gap where they seem to be people rather than typical politicians.
Live look at the White House, if we have it, if we can show it real quick, because today, Leland, was the first press briefing for Caroline Leavitt, the new incoming press secretary. You and I have both been in that room many a times. It is a very, very interesting scene, to put it mildly.
Well, what's interesting is, right, and we can think about it, it's not much bigger than the studio we're in right now. It is tiny. It's actually probably smaller in some ways than the studio here. I thought she did a remarkably good job. And what was most interesting to me, and to Sean Spicer, who we will talk to, is not necessarily how she did, but how different the press was.